Talking about parenting, the first thing we learned is that we parent as with the delegated authority of God, the real parent for all of us. That we draw our parenting from God. And that's what Paul says in Ephesians. And we learned that that is something that we must, of necessity, put ourselves into. Form our mind as parents, that we are not the authority. We are doing what we are doing for God. Then on part 2, we talked about that one of the most important things a parent can give a child is a vision. Let him to understand his purpose in life, why he was born, why he was created. And since we are talking about the call of God, help the child to get to understand what God has called him to be and to do in life, so that he spent his time preparing for it and doing it for the rest of his life. And it's the responsibility of a parent to do that. On this part 3, we want to emphasize that the parent not only gives a vision and mission or assists the child to realize his vision and mission, he also is the one who helps him to have values. And one of the important things about values is that they are what we call the non-negotiable convictions somebody has. And because they are non-negotiable, it means that they direct your attitude and they direct your behavior, because you are unlikely to behave outside your values. But then values are a subset of something we call worldview. Worldview are the set of glasses through which you interpret life. And those glasses you get from your parent, because experts tell us that worldview is developed between the ages of, let's say, 18 months, when the child can start talking and hearing. And but before you became a teenager, 13, your worldview is fully formed. From then onwards, for the rest of your years, you will be using that worldview to interpret life. Is it good? Is it bad? Is that a good taste? Is it a bad taste? Is there a good smell or a bad smell? All that is determined by how you develop. That's why we said last time that you are 80% nurture, only 20% nature. In other words, your genetic makeup influences who you are, only to 20%. The environment in which you develop, your nurture, will give you your worldview, and therefore will determine the direction you move in life. According to researchers called George Barna in the US, in an interview he did, by the time a teenager is 13 or 14, you can't do much about changing his. If he thinks that it's not good to eat frogs, it will be very difficult to convince him to start eating frogs. His worldview is formed. It may be refined, of course, a bit through the teen years. But by the time you hit your 20s, not only is the worldview solid, but most people become evangelists defending their worldview. And I think that's something that tells you how powerful parenting is. Of course, we like all of us to think we are basically okay. We don't need our parents. The truth is, you are your parents. And that's why this idea of thinking that to be a patriotic nationalist means to ignore your tribe and your clan is cheating yourself, because the way you look at things will always be influenced, not determined, but influenced by the kind of upbringing you had, which will be important. And that's why you need to understand your roots, understand your clan, your tribe, then understand your nation. But you will see the way you are interpreting your nation depends on the kind of upbringing you actually had. You can modify it, but it will always be there. And I think that will be, there's virtually universal recognition that the notable Prussian philosopher who was called Immanuel Kant, and who coined the term in his native language, Weltanschauung, that is what we call in English worldview. He wrote something called the Critique of Judgment, and then he finally published it in 1790. He is the one who gave us this idea that people have a worldview. Its origin is in a quintessential Kantian paragraph that emphasizes the power of the perception of the human mind. This philosopher, Kant, says, and I quote, "If the human mind is nonetheless to be able even to think the given infinite without contradiction, it must have within itself a power that is supersensible." And what he really is saying is that that in the process we must be people who understand that our thinking, although we think we are thinking originally, we are really being influenced by the worldview that we have in our mind, and I think that will be very, very important. Somebody else called G.K. Chesterton writes, and I quote, "But there are some people, nevertheless, and I'm one of them, who think that the most practical and important thing about a man is still his view of the universe. We think that for a landlady considering a lodger or a tenant, it is important to know his income, but still more important to know his philosophy. We think that for a general about to fight an enemy, it is important to know the enemy's numbers, but still more important to know the enemy's philosophy. We think the question is not whether the theory of the cosmos affect matters, but whether in the long run anything else affects them." And I think that will be something important for us to deal with and ask ourselves. So it's a very important, this issue of worldview is actually pretty now accepted as an issue. David K. Naugle, Naugle, continues discussing this topic of worldview, and says there is virtually universal recognition that the notable philosopher Kant is the one who actually came up with the idea of worldview. This idea that we have with us cannot be intended, but regarded as a substrate underlying what is mere appearance, namely an intuition of the world from within us. This idea of intuition of the world that Kant is talking about is an English translation of Kant's coined German term, Wachsend. I think it will be important for us then to understand big words don't mean much. What we mean is you have a philosophy of life, a way of looking at things that you got before you became a teenager, and it is so embedded in you that it will be very, very difficult to actually change it. Because the idea he came up with was so important, within no time others were talking about it. For example, The idea went to Britain from Germany, and then it went across to the United States. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, within 78 years of its inaugural use by Kant, it entered the English language in 1868, and here in the English language we called it worldview. 10 years later, the German term itself gained currency as a loan word in Anglo-American academic discourse. Since then, the mid-19th century beginnings, both the German form and the English form worldview have flourished and become significant terms in the thoughts and even the vocabulary of thinking people in the English-speaking world. Throughout the 19th century, therefore, this term became enormously popular. By the 1890s, the Scottish theologian James Orr could say that as a concept, it had become in kind of indispensable. It is no wonder then that Orr himself, as well as Abraham Cooper, capitalized on its neutrality as a convenient and potent expression to configure their respective versions of comprehensive Christian worldview of Calvinist persuasion. And that will be something that's important for us to think about. So all that, since it happens when you are too young, I think it will be important for us to then understand that if you are to get that you need your parents to help you. Of course, if your parents are Christian, what they will give you is a biblical worldview, and I think that will be important. A biblical worldview is the most significant framework that a Christian administrator or educator or parent can establish in your children or students. It is the fabric of the parenting, not something merely computerized in a lesson, but how do you engage the necessary conversation with your children so that they even what you hand them over could be called a biblical worldview. I would suggest like Dr. Brian Smith, Senior Manager of Biblical Worldview Formation at BJU Press, suggests you need to help the child to articulate the function and necessity of biblical worldview. Why should he interpret things using the Bible? At a very early age, they must be given to understand the authority of the scriptures. Then go and help the child to understand what are the basics of this biblical worldview. What does the Bible say about the world, about life? Then you must help him to distinguish that this biblical worldview is different from his classmates and people he is playing around with who have what be called secular worldview. We must therefore create a strategy of helping this worldview to permeate the mind of our children. So we have to therefore design ways of fostering meaningful biblical integration in whatever else we are discussing. We may be discussing any topic that the child comes up with, and you find a way of getting him to see that subject from a biblical angle. And then instruct him from the Bible and read the Bible with him on a regular basis, right from the age of 2, when he is very young. Mine I started with the Bible in pictures so that they see pictures. And then you must check that what he has access to, the TV programs, the books he reads, check, because each one of them will give him worldview, limit what he can access. And when they are young, you actually can't limit what they access so that they don't get to hear things that contradict what the kind of worldview you are trying to develop. And I think that will help you to see how to deal with it, so that the child in the end can be said to have a biblical worldview. Because that's really what you want to help the child to get. My prayer is that you make it, if you are a parent of a preteen, you realize you don't have all the time. So you can't waste time. You have to find a way of taking every opportunity to do it. But what's a Christian worldview? I repeat, a true and complete Christian worldview is not something that can exist so that you do it only in church on Sundays. Christian worldview is the way you live from Monday to Saturday to Sunday. So it is your everyday life, because the things you are seeing daily, how you interpret them, is what you will be calling the worldview. So you therefore decide that Jesus himself is your worldview. Just as it says in the book of John chapter 14 verse 6. Forming our worldview on Christ's life and teachings is the only way of making meaning out of life. Because worldview helps you to make meaning out of life. So it will be important for you to ask yourself, have you helped your child to have Jesus as his worldview? That means you base all your interpretation on Jesus. Somebody called it Christocentricity. That means seeing everything through Christ. Whether you are discussing family planning, or you are discussing economics, or you are discussing agriculture, whatever it is you discuss, you see it through the eyes of Jesus. That's basically what you'll be talking about if you are talking about a Christian worldview. You see, a worldview is a compilation of an individual's perceptions and interpretations of the world. In fact, maybe the best way of saying is the way the person understands reality. And it all boils down to what role does God play in life? Just all is ORR in the Christian view of God and the world maintains that there is a definite Christian view of things, which has a character, it also has coherence, and has unity on its own. And it stands in sharp contrast with counter theories, speculations, and worldviews. So there is such a thing as a Christian worldview, and that's what you want your child to have. And I think that will be very, very, very important to deal with, and to see how you can help your child to understand it, knowing you have a sell-by date, and therefore you do not have all the time. You have to make a decision at a very, very early stage to not only be with your child, but listen, maybe slow down your professional career because of this deadline. You see, what you are trying to help your child to see is a comprehensive conception of the world. Like you stand in one point and you look at the rest of the world. So therefore, a Christian worldview is a comprehensive conception of the world from a Christian standpoint. An individual's worldview is his big picture, a harmony of all his beliefs about the world. It is his way of understanding reality. Or your worldview can be seen as the basis for making daily decisions. And therefore, it becomes extremely important. That's why one person will make one decision and another will make another one. And I think that is an important thing for us to deal with. GodQuestions.org says, an apple sitting on a table is seen by several people. A botanist looking at the apple classifies it. But if you're an artist, you see a still life and you draw it. But if you're a grocer, you see an asset and you see inventories that you can make business out of. A child looks at the same apple and he thinks of lunch and thinks of eating it. So, can you see you are looking at the same thing, but because of your inner belief system, you are interpreting it differently. How we look at any situation is influenced by how we look at the world at large. What we therefore mean is Christian worldview deals with at least those assumptions that are causing you to interpret. Some of the most important things that you need to help your child to see is, where did we come from? Don't tell him that we are bought in a supermarket. He must understand where God comes in, where we come from. And you must help the child to see, why are we on earth? Why is he on earth? Why are people on earth? Then he must be able to understand the many things that are wrong. Before he is a teenager, he already watches TV and can see there are many things wrong in the world. What's wrong with the world? What has gone wrong with it? And he must also know, what could we do to fix the world? He must also help him to see that that is the biblical worldview. There could also be a naturalist worldview. You know, for them, if you ask them, where did you come from? The naturalists will say, we are a product of random acts of nature with no real purpose. We came from the Big Bang. Now, if that's how you interpret life, there will be several things that will follow in your decision making. The naturalist worldview will say we do not respect nature as we should, so he gets caught up in nature. These are the type of people who will protect the animal kingdom even more than the human kingdom. And these are the same people who think we can save the world through ecology and conservation. They don't see the human heart. They see the naturalistic view that what needs to be corrected is nature. So you can see clearly the view you take will be important. You see, the Christian worldview will say we are God's creation, designed to govern the world and fellowship with Him. Isn't that what Genesis chapter 1 verse 27 to 28 says? And it's repeated in chapter 2, Genesis chapter 2 verse 15. So a Christian worldview believes we and everything else we see in it is God's creation. And that God did not just create, He designed human beings to fit in the world. But He also designed human beings to relate with Him. We are created to please God. We are created to relate with God. That answers the first question. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Is to have time with God and to manage His creation. The second question, they will have a different answer to it. What is wrong with the world? The Bible tells us that what's wrong with the world is that we sinned against God and subjected the whole world to a curse. That's the message of Genesis chapter 3. So what you see wrong with the world, the biblical worldview says, is all because of the fall of man. Then on the question of how can we deal with the challenges and the things that are wrong with the world, the Christian will give it a different answer. He will say God Himself has redeemed the world through the sacrifice of His Son, Jesus Christ. which is the message he promised in Genesis 3:15, and we see its fulfillment in the Gospels, Luke chapter 19, verse 10. And we need to explain that the world has a problem, but God, through Jesus, is fixing it. And one day, he will restore the whole creation to its former perfect state. That was Isaiah chapter 65, verse 17-25 is actually saying. A Christian worldview leads us to believe in moral absolutes. In other words, in a biblical worldview, there are certain absolutes. It's not relative. You can't be both right. Relativism means you are right in your own way and I'm right in my own way. No, because we are created by God. He has laws, spiritual laws that are absolute. And if you don't follow them, you are wrong. We don't have different opinions. A Christian also believes because God is the one who created the world, he can intervene in it through miracles. A miracle is something that doesn't obey the rules of nature, and that God can still give it that. He also talks about because human beings are created differently from the rest of the world, we have human dignity. Human is an epitome of creation. We are not to be compared with animals. And we have to keep remembering that we are all destined for redemption if we repent our sins. And therefore, we'll be restored and be able to deal with nature and manage it in a better way. And that will be important. All that is the work of a father. He is the one. How is he to do it? I think he's to do it by living his life as a child sees. We are taught by someone, habits are caught, not taught. Children don't listen to what you say. They see what you do. If you say that you value God, but they can see you value other things more than God, what they'll do is they'll take your value of the other things, not value of God. So it is the way you live your life. You are a role model as a parent. That's why you need to be available. For example, your definition of success is likely to become your child's definition of success because they are the role model. You know one of the bad stories out of Abraham's life is the lie we see in Genesis 12, verse 19-20. Why did you say she's my sister, so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abraham to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. Abraham lied to Pharaoh. Sounds like the boy was watching. The son was watching, because in Genesis 26, verse 7-8, we read, when the men of that place asked him about his wife, now they're asking Isaac, he said, she is my sister, because he was afraid to say, she is my wife. He thought the men of this place might kill me on account of Rebekah, because she is beautiful. When Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from a window and saw Isaac caressing his wife Rebekah. My friend, if you truly want to help your child to get a worldview, don't just talk to him. Leave it out in his presence. He will not listen to what you say as much as what you do. A child keeps saying, when I grow up, I'll not go to church like my father. Many parents want their children to be taken to Sunday school by the mother. But the father never goes to church. If he's a boy, he says, yeah, I understand. Church is for children and women. When I grow up, I'll no longer go to church. And when they grow up, they don't go to church, you feel, what's wrong with you? We brought you in church. No. I knew church was not important for men. It was only important for women and children, because that's the demonstration we saw. So it's a responsibility of parents to give to children their worldview. And that worldview is critical because it will determine the kind of life they will live for the rest of their life. Before your child becomes a teenager, do anything you can to be available and present in his life. Number one. Number two, to set a model the kind of belief system you like him to have. Number three, to be available to answer questions when it is a teaching time. He's willing to listen.